Central bank digital currency revolution is moving forward, and I bet you didn't know they now come pre-installed on cell phones. Yep, that's right. Huawei Mobile Harmony Digital Yuan, so that you don't need a CBDC app. And just don't think that's limited to China, because every country around the world has plans for rebranding their national currencies. And just because Donald Trump said that there will be no CBDC here in the US doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case. Because just as easy as the Chinese can have their digital yuan pre-installed on a cell phone, we too have experience with having things installed in your phone without your permission or your desire to even have it. Let's talk about this one. All right, so I wanted to take a quick minute, share some thoughts in reference to some recent developments out of China regarding the digital yuan and how, despite all the noise coming out of China as to how their economy is not doing well and all the quantitative easing that they're doing, they're still moving forward with rebranding their currency. And from the looks of it, it's one thing when the government forces it on people, but it's another thing when the tech industry in of itself is helping the government push the agenda of providing people with the tools needed to actually hold their currency on their phone. And it's my suspicion that even though right now at this current moment in the US, it's not either desired or wanted by the people, but then again, I wouldn't anticipate a CBDC being rolled out in the midst of so-called economic growth or a boom period in our country. It's usually going to come on the back end after something happens. And then that's when it can easily be provided via an update or directly through the App Store based upon some previous events that took place not too long ago in our country. And if you put it all together, to me, it spells trouble for our personal finances in the near to long-term future for our country when it comes to these instruments known as the Federal Reserve Note. So as always, if you guys want to hear more of these, definitely hit that thumbs up button, show your support for the channel, drop a comment down below, let me know your thoughts on this subject matter as I put it all together. And then also make sure you subscribe if you guys want to see more of these little quick takes where I share my 2 cents on things to try to make sense of what's really happening beyond the things that we're being sold from the mainstream propaganda, especially all the euphoria taking place right now on the potential hope and dreams of a lot of people who actually think this country is going to be great again without addressing one of many of our issues, and it happens to be surrounding our currency. So what exactly am I talking about? Here we have something that might have flown under the radar to where I'm sure you haven't seen this or heard about this because it wasn't talked about in the Western media. But nevertheless, it's my job to comb the airways to find the truth as to what's really taking place behind the scenes and give it to you and let you decide whether or not it's something you want to work with or not. So as you can see here, it says Huawei Mobile Harmony embeds digital yuan so you don't need a CBDC app. And this came out earlier this month here. And as you can see here, I'll read through it real quickly. It says after the US government blocked Google from working with Chinese technology company Huawei, developed its own operating system, Harmony OS, which drops compatibility with Google's Android. It previously announced plans to integrate with the digital, but now it has done it and incorporated the central bank digital currency at the system level. So that makes it unique because typically we've always been expecting some type of additional third-party app either supplied by the PBOC or whatever institution directly, but yet when you have the Central Bank of China, the government, and the tech company working together, clearly there's no need for an app where you can just build it right into the software itself. It says here, hence, if someone develops an app with a payment function, much like there would be a card payment component, there can be a digital RMB component. This allows users to directly pay with the CBDC from within the app without using the digital RMB app. Then it goes on to say, future enhancements include jointly developing financial middleware to support interoperability with other financial applications. And then once again, interoperability. That word sounds very familiar, I'm sure. There are also plans to work on risk prevention and security detection, quote, to improve the central bank's penetrating supervision capabilities of the digital RMB on the premise of protecting user privacy and security. On the one hand, the digital RMB is money, so there is a need for very strong protection to prevent double spending. At the same time, all CBDCs, but especially China's, suffer from the big brother concerns of a government monitoring customer activities. And so there you have the idea of the digital renminbi not coming through a third-party app, but being built directly within the software system itself. So therefore, not only will close to 1 billion users have access directly on their phones, but they also have the app as well. So here it says China's digital yuan eCNY wallet tops the download charts in Apple and Xiaomi app stores ahead of the Lunar New Year, and this was 2 years ago. As you can see here, the initial digital renminbi was launched in 2020 during COVID, and at the time, there was 1.8 billion worth of the currency actually created. And then it says, for example, in 2022, it was reported that over 260 million CBDC wallets were open in China, and those are the third-party apps. And not only, as I just mentioned, is there potentially 1 billion users that will have access to this currency, just like we have the smart movement where everything is labeled as smart nowadays and compatible with a multitude of devices. They are also building the same type of infrastructure where it says here, digital renminbi launches component service, which is adapted to the Hongmen system and will integrate into the future with intelligent networks. So basically what that means is that not only will people have access to the CBDC CBDC on their phone or third-party apps, but it'll also be interconnected with every other aspect of their lives where payment is either required or needed for people to interact with the systems. So this is just more of how China is leading the way in this revolution towards rebranding the currency. But then again, so is the US. And a lot of people don't even realize it. And one thing I'm very confident about is regardless of who is in the White House, whether it was Biden or Trump, when stuff hits the fan, we already see what they intend to do. And they haven't spent billions of dollars building out the infrastructure for it not to be rolled out when it's needed. And so there's a lot of legal issues with being able to roll one out. But then again, based upon what happened in 2020, it was very convenient how Congress was able to come to agreement on bipartisanship when it was time to roll out all that health stuff that came out into the world. But one thing to keep an eye on is worth paying attention to, and where I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but then again, I wouldn't bet against it, is that when you actually look at the idea that the US is already in the pilot phase, it hasn't been launched yet, but then again, the icing on the cake will end up being whether or not President-elect Donald Trump, once he becomes president, if he doesn't null and void President Joe Biden's issued Executive Order 14067, and making that null and void, then this executive order would still be in play, and it's the authorizing signature needed to have the Federal Reserve Bank, as well as all those third-party applicants and institutions that are helping the Federal Reserve build out the network needed to actually accomplish instant payment system, which is already done. Once again, something we're paying attention to. And for those who may not be familiar with it, there's already some projects that are, in my personal opinion, probably already finished. And those projects that are part of the pilot program happen to be Project Hamilton, Project Cedar, and lastly, the press release that came out 2 years to the same time frame where the New York Central Bank announced that they were collaborating on a proof of concept project to explore the feasibility of interoperable network central bank wholesale digital money and commercial bank digital money operating on a shared multi-entity distributed ledger. And so once again, 3 different projects authorized by signature of Joe Biden in 2022 under an executive order. No matter how much Trump has said during his campaign rallies that he's not for a CBDC, unless he overrides that executive order and basically calls for all the Federal Reserve activity to cease in reference to what they're working on, then all those promises during the campaign trail will be null and void. But then again, he don't really have to call no more because they already developed even more of the direct payment system. And what am I talking about? The FedNow service hits a key milestone, over 1,000 participants strong and counting. So what exactly is the FedNow system? It's an instant payment service developed by the Federal Reserve for depository institutions in the United States, which allows individuals, business to send and receive currency. And the service launched on July 20th, 2023. And banks will be able to build products on top of the FedNow platform. By 2024, hundreds of banks and credit unions were reportedly utilizing the service. So literally a software program in which the Federal Reserve has created for the point of depository institutions or the commercial banks, which would include the too big to fail banks, the credit unions, and anything else under the FDIC window, I'm sure, now has access to this software to be able to plug in to transact instant real-time payments. So once again, software already built out, and it's being used now. And as they say here, FedNow is not a CBDC because it is not a liability of the federal government. So it's actually not a liability of the government, but it is an asset of the intermediary parties that are using this software to transact value back and forth. Barring some type of legal and legislative type of framework that Congress would have to come to agreement upon if there was an emergency type of situation, the software is built out. The FedNow system is transacting value across this new software. All it needs is a president's signature to authorize it, and voila, we have a rebranded form or a more modernized version of our currency that will be in circulation. So the next thing is, how will they actually get it to the people? And that's where I think we have previous experience on how doing emergency measures, it's easy to roll things out, all disguised as a way to be able to help people in real time to minimize the disaster of a certain type of crisis. And what better example to use than what happened in March 2020 when the Trump administration announced that it would take 15 days to slow the spread, promising the crisis would turn around fast. I'm sure that everybody remember who have iPhones that all of a sudden you got a firmware update where now you have the function that you didn't even ask for or even wanted of being able to not only find out if you've been in contact with somebody who was tested positive, or you can update the world yourself if you had some type of symptoms. And as you can see on the screen over here, this didn't come because people requested it. This came because the CDC, just 2 months after it was supposed to take 15 days to slow the spread, they were tracking millions of people via their phone. And so when you have Alphabet, Google, and Apple working hand in hand during an emergency type of situation, it was very easy to get access to people, keep them informed, or to provide them health information, whether or not they wanted it. So it was all done via firmware update. So basically saying it was built into the software. So here it says CDC tracked millions of phones to see if Americans followed the COVID lockdown orders. And then as you see from my iPhone users right here, you had the COVID exposure notification you could turn on or off. But then again, how do you really know when you turn something off that it's actually off? Because it's already in the software. And if you don't write the code, you don't determine what can be seen in the back doors at all. And it's just not my iPhone people either. Google also made sure that that they had an app as well as a firmware update so that they can help people keep track of the health emergency when it was at its peak. And as you can see here, it says exposure notifications help slow the spread with one step on your phone. So once again, an opportunity for people to download an app or turn on notifications so that they can be notified whenever there was a risk of them being in close proximity with someone who was contagious. So this is just all on the health side of things. And we see how big tech, along with governments, can collaborate in the best interest of the people. So if it's happening in China right now, in the open, what would make you think it wouldn't happen here in the US? Also in the open, whenever the event warrants the necessity for our government to get involved and provide a solution to a problem that everyone is impacted by. Once again, just wanted to come together, share with you some thoughts in reference to what we can learn from what's already taken place now and how one executive order that was signed in 2022 by Joe Biden, if it's not made null and void, and if it flies under the radar or gets swept under the rug, there you have the opportunity for the collaboration again of big tech with government to present a solution to a problem that might lie ahead in the future that we don't know about yet, but then again, of course, they know what's coming. So as of now, with the FedNow system already fully operational, and that software system in of itself, I'm sure having a lot of key distinctions and similarities to what a central bank digital currency can actually look like, just disguised as something else, already operational. It wouldn't be too hard, in my opinion, for them to do a little coding on the back end to change things around and have it pivot in a different direction so they can make sure that people have instant access to funds to make payments and everything from that point on. And then as always, what I find the most useful is to not pay attention to what they're telling us, but what they're actually building out. And so with Huawei working with their government and Google and Apple having worked with our government here, you have a lot of blockchain companies that are also working with the major institutions. And what am I talking about? Here we have a 30-minute discussion from the Chainlink SmartCon, which was a conference held a couple weeks ago. And here on this panel here, we have people excited about the recent developments with CBDCs. Even this is called Unlocking Blockchain-Based Central Bank Cash for Capital Markets. And right here, halfway through their panel, the young lady who's doing the interviewing asked the gentleman right above my head here in the suit about some of the difficulties. And he mentioned about the legislative side of things and the legality of it in certain jurisdictions. And then he goes on to talk about how, based upon what happens with Trump, will determine the outlook and the timing of when the CBDC will be rolled out. And then he mentions that if Trump gets in, they may or may not see a CBDC for 8 to 12 years. But then again, he's talking about if everything remains smooth and calm. But then again, we all know that something's brewing and something's going to break between now and then. So it might be a lot easier for these type of entities to achieve their goals. But once again, great interview for those who want to dive deeper. Here's another interview that says bringing 11,500 financial institutions on chain with SWIFT, UBS, as well as a couple other companies. And so in this video, he lays out a perfect blueprint as to how the SWIFT bank is interoperable, connecting with a lot of major key players, as it says here, 11,500 banks. And so clearly the future is being built out. It's just here in the US, we're not focusing on it because there's so much euphoria, so much hype about what could be, but not really realizing that they've already spent so much time, energy, and effort to get us to this point to where it's good to say that one person or one party or one movement is going to stop them from accomplishing this. So this is something we're paying attention to. As always, if you found value, hit that thumbs up button, drop a comment down below, let me know where I missed it or your thoughts on this. And if you're new, subscribe. And more importantly, if there was at least one thing in this video that got your wheels churning and got you thinking, then take this video, share it with others so more people can find out what's going on. And as always, if you want more videos like this, check out this video here because it too will help you get your wheels churning. Other than that, catch you guys later.